The ds-incubator continues on the series about testing our code, and we're actually getting close to the end. I think we'll have probably 1 or 2 more meetups, and I ask you on Slack, what's your sentiment, and if we can wrap up here if there's anything that we are missing. But today the meetup is an extension of the one that we had last time. We are going to continue talking about snapshot testing. Last time we saw the workflow very briefly, and we spent most of the time also discussing some ideas about how to go about testing plots. And today I wanted to spend more time in practice, like showing you a little bit of live code and how snapshot tests can help us very quickly capture or increase the coverage of a piece of code that we want to refactor. So that's one use case that Alex mentioned last time, and I got kind of excited about that idea because I noticed that it is a very common use case. So I wanted to use that use case as a way to revisit snapshot testing and to show you that it is actually pretty useful. There is a bunch of issues as well that snapshot tests have, like they can be very brittle if you don't do specific things, like skipping tests in different platforms or skipping tests on CRAN. So there are some resources that you can use, some tools that you can use to skip those tests in environments that you are not interested in being so specific. So let's get into it. So the motivation is to create basically, the motivation is the following. So I'm here in working in a package that already has a feature that is untested. So the feature is called scatterplot penguins. There's a beautiful data set called penguins in the package Palmer penguins. And we're gonna be using that as an excuse to show you how to use snapshot tests to first start covering the feature with tests and then start refactoring it. So just to give you a visual idea of what we are talking about, the feature that we have here is called scatterplot penguins, and it produces a scatterplot like the one shown here on the screen, where we see for 3 different species of penguins the relationship between the depth of the bill and the length of the bill. It is very similar to the iris dataset, and it is actually designed precisely to try and replace the iris dataset. So this feature is not covered by any tests. I'm gonna show you that by running, I'm pressing Shift-Control-R. Remember that you can link specific add-ins to your shortcuts. So let's see if this is working. So add-ins here, or you can press Shift-Control-P as well, and you can start typing something like report test coverage for a file or a package. So let's do it for entire package. So this is the same package that I've been working with throughout the series. So here we have a report for the features that are tested, but notice that scatterplot penguins, if I click here, it all appears in red because no line of this feature is covered by tests. So that means that, for example, if I say that I remove this code here, and if I rerun my tests with Shift-Control-T, I'm discussing also the keyboard shortcuts because by now you may be already using some tests, and the workflow is like a key part of our work. So notice that all tests pass even when I change dramatically the feature. So that's kind of an indication that this feature is unsafe to refactor. We first need to, I'm gonna undo what I just did. We first need to add some tests to this feature before we can actually safely refactor it. So there is a bunch of things that I would like to refactor in this function. For example, the style is one thing. The line is beyond the mark of 80 characters that you see here vertically. So I would like, those lines to be styled differently. Also, this part here is dealing with labels, and there is no way for the user to change those labels. So the interface is quite rigid. So I would like to kind of allow the user to do kind of the same thing, but in a slightly different way, in a more flexible way. And before I can do that, I need to add some tests. So there's a bunch of tests you could think about. You could test if this feature outputs a ggplot. You could check a bunch of things. But a very quick way, if all you need to do is to capture the current state of a feature very quickly, so you're not interested in changing the behavior, you're just interested in making sure the behavior remains the same, and the changes that you make as you refactor your code does not change the output, does not change the behavior that the user experiences. And if it does change, you want to be notified so that you confirm that if it was an intentional change or not. So one quick way to do that is to use snapshot tests. So I'm gonna create a file for tests. Remember, there's a function useTest in the useThis package. That function, if you have a file open, it will be aware of it, and it will use the same name to create a test file. And it already adds a little bit of a toy expectation here. So the title of this test is gonna be something like, it starts, in your head, you first read the name of the file, so scatterplot penguins, and then you start adding the string here in the title of the test. Hasn't changed. So that is what I want to test now, that whatever I do, the feature remains the same. So what I want to do is I'm going to remove the toy example, and actually I'm going to reuse the examples here in the package. So the package already includes some examples, so I'm going to reuse them. Let's comment out that thing and style it a little better. So here we first create the data, and then we just produce the scatterplot, and we save it in an object called P. When you print P, because it's a ggplot, and there is a print method designed for that type of object, for ggplot objects, that will print to the screen here to the viewer. But you can also do other things with it. Like you can ask, for example, the structure of P, right? And what you will get is this object, right? So you can see the list that underlies the ggplot object. Or you can also see it in the viewer, right? And this is what it is. So this is, this information about the data, about the layers, the scales, labels, a bunch of things. This one argument, this one element of the list, plot_env, is going to change every time you run the plot, and therefore it would make any snapshot test very brittle, very easy to break. Notice how, for example, this ends in 2, 3, 5, 8. So let's replot that to see if that changed. Actually, I didn't try this, but let's see, I'm just taking the risk. Plot_env, yeah, there you go. So now you can see how plot_env, the number here, the environment has changed, because every time that you run it, it runs in a fresh environment, in a random environment, or created at random, or the name is at random. So that means that that's not something that I want in my snapshot test. So I'm going to remove that parameter. Easy to do. You just apply null to p $, and the element that you want to remove. In this case, it was plot_env. So I'm going to assign null. So my snapshot, so that I'm nulling out. I'm removing the element plot_env from that object. So now if I do again view p, I should not see a plot_env here. You see? So now this object is more stable, and it shouldn't change, at least not in my environment, from run to run, which means that it's a good thing I could create a snapshot for. So basically the output that I can see here on the screen, I would like to just create a snapshot on a file, right? And that's exactly what snapshot tests do. Expect snapshot allows me to, in this case, pass the structure of P, not just P, a structure of P, and save that in a file. How do I save it? Well, simply by running the test. Shift Control T allows me to do that. So I'm going to run all the tests with Shift Control T. And as you can see here down, I get a warning telling me that I'm creating a new snapshot, and it prints the output of that snapshot for the first time that you run it. Here is a warning. It shows me the code that I ran, and it shows me output. But if I run the test again, that warning won't be produced because the snapshot is already created. So now my test passed cleanly. And that's all I need, right? So if I now rerun, I'm gonna press Shift-Control-P because I want to produce coverage, to produce another test coverage. In this case, I'm gonna do it for the file, for the active file. Let's see if that works. Here, there you go. So as you can see, I just produced the test report for this file specifically, and see how with just one test I covered completely the feature. I see all in green. Before it was in red, now it's all in green. So every line of the feature is covered by tests. It's done in a very coarse way, but it also means that if I removed the same code that I removed before, say that I remove this, right, and if I run my tests again, now my snapshot test should fail. It should tell me something that, okay, something has changed. And there you go. You see there is a failure here. Let me expand this a little bit. And what's showing is that because the element labels of the ggplot2 object that I saved as a snapshot, that changed completely because I completely removed the labels there. So as you can see, that it's pretty difficult, a little bit difficult to interpret, but you understand there is something about the labels, right, that is wrong. So that's all I need. I don't need at this stage just to refactor something and preserve the behavior. Maybe I don't need to spend too much time adding tests. Just with one snapshot test should be enough. So now it's pretty safe because I know that I could be warned if something very coarse changes. So it should be safe to do something like maybe to style this file, style active file, for example. So I can do that. I don't think it changed at all, but I'm gonna press Shift-Control-A here. That's a different style as well. And I kind of like it more because it's not overflowing the 80 characters mark. So let's run my test again because I have just changed the code. It shouldn't change the behavior, and effectively it hasn't. I confirmed that by running my test, and I see that all my tests pass, which is good. And there's a few other things that I could do here as well. So for now, I'm gonna say, well, this is enough for styling, but I would also like to, for example, extract the labels. Let's say that, okay, I would like the user to be able to inject their own labels to change the title, for example, if they want. Right now, there is no way for users to do that. So if they just plot that plot, they can't interact with it. So I would like to, give them an interface to inject the title X, Y, and whatever else they want. So one good way I think would be to just create another function that is, let's call it penguins labs. And here, what I'm gonna do is I will just output the labs. So I will give the user the opportunity to call this function just to first create a scatter plot and then use Penguin Labs separately. So the result should be the same in the end, but they have to do Penguins Labs as a separate feature, and here is where I want to I want them to be able to pass something here. So for example, the title could be null. And then I could handle title with, for example, Erlang. I could say title. Well, actually, I could say title is whatever the user passes as title, or if there is nothing, then they can. It will be this title that I choose. For X and Y, the same. So let's do that. X, let's do null. Y, let's do null. And let's do the same here. So it's gonna be X if there is user input, or it's gonna be what I choose, build length in millimeters, and y the same thing. So that's my feature, but I want to make it even more flexible. So I'm going to allow the user to pass ... so that if there is more arguments in the labs function, they should be able to pass, to pass them there. So that's my implementation of how I want this feature to look like. I think this should be fine in one line because it fits. There you go. So this is what it looks like. But notice that I changed the function dramatically. So now I expect the tests to fail. So I expect the snapshot to change, but it was an intentional change. So let's see what happens. So I'm going to run my tests. I should see a failure. I do see it there, right? And now what changed is that label part that I expected it to change. So what I can do is to run snapshot accept, right? I basically copy paste this code to the console here, right? And just paste that. So I refresh the snapshot. If I now rerun my tests, they should pass because the snapshot is a new snapshot, right? So I have just updated them. So and now I can just confirm visually that the user can do what I wanted them to do. So they can create basically with P, right? So P is just the scatter plot, but with no special custom labels. And I'm very close to the end. As you can see, it's the default labels, the boring labels, no title that ggplot2 kind of creates. And now I can add all the custom labels that, well, not custom, all the opinionated labels that I created for them just by passing. Okay, so there is no function default here. So what I need to do is I need to use the package Erlang. We use package Erlang, there you go. And I also need to import the import from Erlang. I need to import this function, and I need to document. So with this, I think, let me restart my session and let's see if it works now. There is no function. Import from Erlang this document. Refresh. I'm struggling with this. Okay, it looks like now it worked. Okay, so now the user should be able to separate the task of creating a plot with the ggplot2 labels from the act of adding nicer labels. Now, if they run Penguins Labs, they change that, and if they want to change the title, they could say title custom title. I see a question, or maybe someone trying to kick me out. As you can see, that did change the output there.
Just tell you that it's 420.
Thank you very much. So yes, let's wrap it up here. So basically what I have done is first, I added a snapshot test as a very quick way to have some coverage in a feature that I want to refactor. Second step, I actually started refactoring the function, and I started with things that wouldn't change the snapshot. For example, the style of the code. And then my third step was actually to be more aggressive, and actually I did changes that did change the underlying snapshot, and therefore the tests started to fail. But they were intentional changes, so I used the functions accept snap or snapshot accept with the name of the feature, and that updated the snapshot. So with that, and what I did, in my refactoring, what I did, my aggressive refactoring, what I did is I gave the user a lot more flexibility about how they could create their plots by doing it in 2 steps as opposed to 1. By first creating a basic plot with all the defaults that ggplot2 provides, and then by giving them another feature that by default it could give some opinionated labels, but if they want, they can choose to change that to create their own. So that's the end of my presentation now. So I would be interested in hearing what questions or comments you have. Yes, Monica?
Yeah, I can just comment that we are using a snapshot of plot in one of our tests in the plotting package, and actually it's not working that great because if I produce a snapshot on my in my environment, which is Mac, it's different from what Mauro produces, even though it's just like a ggplot object, but apparently there are some differences. So it's like I mean, it's like an easy task to create, but it's also quite sensitive to the environment in which you're testing.
Thanks a lot, Monica. This was planned. Yes, so the big challenge, I think, of testing is that it's full of trade-offs. It's, when we learn something for the first time, we would love to just be given a set of rules that we can apply kind of blindly and they always work. And testing is very much not like that. All you do is you collect a bunch of patterns in your brain and then you try to apply them in different circumstances, and all the time you're doing trade-offs. So the trade-off here is the following. Snapshot test immediately allowed me to start refactoring, gave me a safety network that worked very well in my local environment. But then, as Monica said, we discovered today that the snapshot tests that were running just fine in my Ubuntu system were failing on her Mac system and also on Windows that we saw on the continuous integration. So what we did is, we acknowledged that this snapshot test is not the only test that we are going to have. We're going to have more specific tests, and this is just a quick way to make sure that if something changes, we know what that is. So for now at least, we agreed to skip this test on continuous integration in general, or we could just skip it on Mac and Windows and just rely on my own system, on Mauro's system and an Ubuntu system, to be like the canary on the mine and give me red flags if something changes. Again, the trade-off is speed for very quickly being able to refactor something that still has a long way to go, against maintainability. And how we gain why is poor maintainability? Because if every time you get false positives, that is very costly in terms of maintenance, because you have to kind of stop what you're doing and check what's going wrong. So you waste a lot of time. That is poor maintainability. So the way we then regain maintainability is by limiting the environment in which this snapshot test runs just to my Ubuntu or to any Ubuntu system. Again, trade-offs that you will have to do, and in some cases they may be just fine, and in other cases the approach that we're doing right now might be the wrong way to go. Any other or Monica, would you like to follow up from here, or any other comment that we have?
No, I don't have any other comments, although the function that's in my version of testdet is skip on OS, not skip on.
Is skip on OS? Okay, thanks. Skip on OS, thank you.
Yeah.
OS, let's see if that actually works. Also, snapshot tests, I understand from the documentation that by default they do not run on CRAN. And that's precisely because it's acknowledged that snapshot tests are kind of brittle, they break quickly, and it's kind of a developer-facing tool to just to know what you might be breaking if something changes. But it shouldn't change. It shouldn't make CRAN servers fail. Because it happens way too often, and CRAN gives you like a week or two to fix a problem if it starts failing on their servers. So that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. So it's better to skip them on CRAN, and that's the behavior by default. One thing I did not cover is how to use snapshot tests. Well, we mentioned it last time, and I think I showed an example, but that's a very good use case as well. That we just didn't have time. Snapshot test can capture, I mean, by default capture, at least the function that I show, expect snapshot, captures everything, including output and also conditions. Conditions are messages, warnings, and if you say error equals true, they will also capture error messages, which is a great tool to see on a file, or to store on a file the exact error messages, warning messages, or just messages that the users get on their console, and format it exactly as they will print to the console. So traditionally, you would kind of test an error message just by trying to match the string, but that doesn't give you information about what's the output that the users look at on the screen. With snapshot test, you do, because basically the length of the console as it is when the snapshot test is created, I guess, is also used to produce the error, to produce the message, or to produce the warning, and to wrap it based on that length of that console. So it's a great way to make sure that the messages or the conditions in general that you print to the screen to your user are readable. So they're quite useful, and slowly I think they are kind of, at least in the tidyverse, I understand they're kind of replacing what used to be specific tests for specific messages, because you had to type, to type the error message or the condition in general, and try to match it. But now you just create a snapshot, read at the snapshot, you can see it. It's an MD file, a Markdown file, easy to see on GitHub when someone submits a pull request. Easy to see that the snapshot actually looks like something readable. We have 1 more minute. Any other comment, question, critique, concern? No? All right, then thank you very much for joining today. I think we have 1 or more meetups. I'll reach out on Slack to see, to see exactly what we'll do. Thanks a lot.